but I do want to talk a little bit about G4, your former employer. Gaming media is at a very fraught time right now. I think last summer we started to kind of see this a little bit. Fanbyte and G4 went down in the same week. They completely closed up shop. For those that are unfamiliar, G4 was the gaming television network channel that had now relaunched and gone more digital, owned by Comcast, NBC, Universal. Ovilee was a part of like the very early on talent team there, but left prior to the departure, before the shutdown. And I think that looking now, we have a lot more context. Game Informer, GameSpot, Giant Bomb, and the Washington Post have all laid off gaming people in the past 3 weeks alone. And I think we're in a really, really fraught space for gaming media more broadly. I know your time at G4 was not all flowers and roses, and I do want to ask a little bit about what are your thoughts on kind of what went wrong with the content? Because the content, I don't think, performed in the way that they expected, and they had pivoted at the end and there was reporting by Nathan Grace of the Washington Post about how costly things became towards the end.
Yeah. So in a sense, I do want to start off by saying that G4 as a concept was freaking phenomenal. And it is still something to this day that I wholeheartedly believed in. That concept being weird, irreverent, pop culture, nerd culture focused style content with faces from the community that you know and love, faces that are legitimately like friends and get along on camera, off camera, and also just want to share their absolute passions with you. So for me, that was anime, it was esports, it was weird cartoons. For people like Kasim G, who was a huge OG YouTuber, his was man on the street style content, it was comic books, it was attending all of these crazy conventions. Like, there were a lot of amazing people at G4, and I truly did believe when it was pitched to me. That being said, G4 was probably doomed from the beginning. As soon as they signed the contract for that, the huge studio that they had, and after finding out how many executives they had with, as you know, executive salaries, expecting to be immediately profitable off of a brand new Twitch channel and a brand new, essentially brand new YouTube channel, it was just never realistic. There were far too many overhead costs. The cost to produce a single episode of our esports show or Attack of the Show was ridiculous. And I feel like some people's unwillingness to try to make something a little bit more scuffed. So I'm not sure if you saw this, but a couple weeks ago, I did this thing called Ovilee out of my room in my house, where I basically put together a League of Legends tournament with a lot of content creators. I had Flowers over and Raz over, and it was scuffed. We had one microphone. It was echoey. It was on a green screen, but still people liked it. Still people had a lot of fun with it. I think we're about 2K views, which isn't a crap ton. I'm going to be honest, I did not make money on it. I spent a lot of money on my equipment, buying the guys dinner. The guys eat a lot, so there was no money there. But just making sure that it was a fun time for my community, for the League of Legends community, and for the guys. I would have loved to do that within G4, but there was a lot of kind of pro clutching. I don't know the phrase for it, of just we need everything to look professional. We need everything to look, very polished, which in my opinion goes very against the entire meaning of G4. So I'm going to challenge this, because I don't believe that our content was terrible. We had fantastic people on our game review team, like Gerard the Completionist, and a lot of the writers that he brought over from his channel, The Completionist, putting out these, in my opinion, excellent game reviews. I think that they had an issue with, they weren't getting any new game copies ahead of time until kind of our second year, or I think first year. So they were reviewing older games to try to placate the older audience on hey, this is what we missed. But also in terms of some of our esports content, we weren't allowed to show esports footage or any games. So that was just an issue again from inception, where it's like, hey, how can you be telling us to create an esports show and yet we can't show a single second of League of Legends footage? So I mean, that was an issue. But honest to God, like, this was nothing on the talent themselves, as we were told that it was going to be a talent-focused network. I mean, the shows that Will Neff and Austin Show created, like, they had a sold out, or, you know, a venue packed for their Name Your Price show that they held at TwitchCon in San Diego. There wasn't an empty seat in the house. People went crazy for it. They loved the content. It was just never going to sustain a incredibly expensive studio and all of the employees that G4 had.
Yeah, I will say, I think kind of two things on that. I do think that some of the content was, I think towards the end, actually kind of finally narrowing in on what might work. Granted, again, extremely expensive when you're paying for like talent appearance fees for some of those creators. Like, there's not a world to like make that money back where it makes sense. And like how much some of those people were reporting, which based off Nathan's reporting was in the seven figures for some of those folks. Which I'm gonna
jump in. There were a lot of inaccuracies in that reporting. I never said it publicly. This is probably the only time I'm going to speak on it. I'm not going to get into details of it, but from that reporting, it seemed like they only spoke with a handful of people, and those were probably the same handful of people that were pretty much against everything that Austin Show and that Will Neff stuff did. So that's
got it. But I will say, I know for certain that some talent were paid pretty exorbitant appearance fees just to appear on those shows, not even to actually produce or host the shows, which like that does get outsized cost gets pretty high at the end. I do think, at least with some of the original content, the game reviewing, the gameplay, X-Plays of the world, etc., it's just bygone era of gaming and esports. Like, there's not, it's not what the audience needs. What made G4 so special when we were all younger and it was on television is that, like, the only other website that really existed that covered this type of stuff was GameSpy. It's literally one, right? Like, think about how much web content there is around gaming now and how big gaming is now, right? Like, you really have to find something that's particularly unique, back to what we were talking about earlier, to be successful in the content creation sphere. And like, the name G4 was like great for nostalgia, but like pretty useless otherwise, I think. Like, it didn't necessarily add value. It didn't make people go like, oh, I want to watch G4's opinion on this. Because like, I think so much of the young audience they were targeting doesn't even know what that is or care.
Yeah. I mean, even to that point, I did not know what G4 was. So when they approached me and said, hey, we want to, you know, revamp G4, it was with Kevin Pereira and Olivia Munn. I said, I don't know what any of those things are that you just listed. I have no idea. I had not heard of Olivia Munn. I had not heard of Kevin Pereira. I had not heard of G4 at all in its entirety. I didn't know what Attack the Show was. I didn't know what X-Play was. I didn't know any of these things. So I said, listen, you're coming to me with this thing. And I think that they kind of thought that, oh, G4, that I would be like, oh my God, G4, here, I will pay you to let me be on it. Because I know that there were a couple people who kind of had that feeling, that passion for G4. But as you said, like, I think one of the biggest or the most difficult conversation that I had with people in the higher up position at G4 was like, listen, our competition is not IGN. Our competition is not GameSpot. It's not, you know, Polygon, Kotaku, like any of these other things. Our competition is XQC. Our competition is like AlphaRad, right? Who's putting out these great game reviews. Like, our competition are the individual content creators who can do everything that we're trying to do for not even a fraction of the budget. 100th
of the cost, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, if you want to go all out, I feel like they should have been making like some crazy original programming outside of just these little game reviews and stuff for just the price that they were paying for everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It does make me worried about games media more broadly, but I don't think engagement's necessarily the problem. I just think the style is the problem. To your point about the cost of the studio, et cetera, we've now seen two companies, you know, G4 is not a startup, but basically a startup within a major media empire, and then another startup in Vin, faceplant after like tens of millions of dollars, woefully misused and, you know, misspent. That is concerning to me, and it's something I know is concerning to others, because I am frequently in calls with media investors who that is the first thing that comes out of their mouth. Like, what do you think about Vin? What do you think about G4? And it's just like, Like, it's like nobody should be spending money like that. That's my thoughts. Like,
it's to me, it is very much get the fancy TV people out of the room because they want to make TV. They don't understand digital.
Yep.
I think that I have learned so much from like traditional TV producers. I mean, you're talking about being forced to learn so much in a short amount of time. I am still incredibly grateful for my time at G4 because even though I was put through the ringer for a couple different things, I learned what television production was. I learned what behind the scenes production was. I learned the intricacies of trying to get a piece of content, jumping through all of the different legal hoops, jumping through all the different production hoops, things that esports does not have, but that I know that esports is going to be forced to adapt to pretty soon, just for the sake of professionalism. But I'm now at the point where it's like, I come back and I look at producers that I've worked with in the past and I'm like, holy crap, in the 2 or 3 years that I've been gone, I've picked up like these freaking decades of experience from all of the crazy crap that I've had to deal with. And I feel like I've aged a decade, but also I can take on and see new, like different ways to problem solve for all these crazy issues that pop up in esports that just haven't arisen just yet, but they will. It's coming.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.